ISAF Episode 2, Zulu Under Fire. Less than 48 hours after landing at Alpha Crater, Jake Harper still felt like he was dreaming. The sheer scale of the hollowed-out volcano had already messed with his head. Now, somebody had shoved him into the back of a battered UH-60 Black Hawk with almost no warning and sent him straight back toward the jungle. Humid air poured through the open side door and clung to his skin like wet cloth. Rotor wash rattled the loose straps on his combat vest. Somewhere beneath the engine noise, an old speaker bolted behind the cockpit was pounding out distorted rock music. Steve, the Mark II assigned to him, was practically vibrating in the seat beside him. His metal feet clanged against the deck with every bounce. "First deployment, boss. This is going to be awesome," Steve shouted over the rotors, broad cyan eyes glowing with excitement. "Firebase Zulu's a total bug grinder. You're going to love it." Jake tightened his grip around the M4 resting across his chest. He still wasn't used to the weight of the old ballistic rifle. Compared with the sleek Federation weapons he had trained with, it felt like something dug out of a museum basement. "I just got here, Steve. Why the hell am I already going back to the front?" Steve tilted his head. "Because you're fresh meat. The bugs love fresh meat. Also, Zek requested you personally. That's either really good or really bad." He paused for half a second. 50-50. Across from them, a woman opened one eye. She had black hair pulled into a rough ponytail, loose strands stuck to her face by sweat, and a faded, olive drab cropped tank top under an open combat harness. Her fatigue trousers were filthy enough to suggest she'd stopped caring about mud years ago. Twin Beretta pistols rode in thigh holsters, one on each leg. A half-finished cigarette hung from the corner of her mouth. Jake nodded toward Steve. "Is he always like this?" The woman took a slow drag. "No, sometimes he's louder." Steve pointed at her with both hands. "That's Rin. She shoots bugs with both hands." "Specialist Rin Sato," she corrected without looking at him. Her eyes moved over Jake's fresh fatigues, his dog tags, and the backwards olive drab baseball cap on his head. "You're the Colonel Puncher." Jake didn't ask. Steve leaned closer to Jake as though sharing classified information. "She likes you." Rin looked at him. "Keep talking, and I'll find out whether your faceplate stops 9mm. Steve's eyes widened happily. "She really likes me." Jake tried not to laugh. "So Zek requested me personally?" Rin's expression shifted by half an inch. "What the hell did you do to him?" "I met him yesterday." "Then he already hates you. That's fast. Usually takes him a week." The Black Hawk banked hard. Jake grabbed the overhead strap and looked through the open door. Firebase Zulu appeared through the mist below. It was ugly in the most honest way possible. A squat oval fortress of concrete walls, HESCO barriers, sandbag nests, firing ramps, and scarred watchtowers sat directly against the edge of the lowland jungle. Woodland camouflage covered one bunker. Desert tan covered the next. A faded winter white tarp had somehow ended up stretched over an ammunition shelter in the middle of humid green hell. Nobody had cared enough to make any of it match. The place had been attacked so many times it had stopped pretending to be anything except a machine built to kill bugs. Rin followed Jake's stare. "Pretty, isn't it?" "Looks like somebody built a fortress out of whatever fell off the back of a truck." "That's because we did." The Black Hawk dropped toward the landing pad. The distorted opening of ACDC's Thunderstruck rolled across the firebase, playing far too slowly through failing battlefield speakers. The bass sounded stretched and wounded, like the song itself had taken shrapnel. Then every alarm on the base screamed to life at once. Red warning lights strobed across the concrete. Soldiers ran for the walls. Mark IIs sprinted between bunkers carrying ammunition crates and belt boxes. One drone tore across the landing pad with both arms above his head, screaming, "Oh shit, oh shit, oh shit," at the top of his vocal processor. Rin crushed her cigarette beneath one boot. The laziness vanished from her face. Both Berettas cleared their holsters before the Blackhawk's wheels touched down. "Welcome to Zulu." She jumped from the aircraft. Jake was still fighting with the last strap on his vest when a small, gray-skinned figure stormed toward him through the rotor wash. Staff Sergeant Zek barely reached Jake's chest. His smooth gray skin shone with humidity, and his enormous black eyes reflected the emergency lights like polished glass. A half-burnt cigarette dangled from his narrow mouth. Part of his M6 pilot suit hung loose over one shoulder, leaving the dark-fitted base uniform visible underneath. He stopped directly in front of Jake and looked him up and down. "You," Jake straightened. "Private Harper." "New boy," Zek said. "You're with me now. Congratulations. You just became my personal meat shield." "Staff Sergeant Zek, sir." "Do not sir me." Zek jabbed one tiny finger into Jake's vest. "I've been in this clown show for 9 years. I've watched better soldiers than you get turned into bug food. You call me Zek, you stay close, and maybe I won't use your corpse as a speed bump for my mech. Understood?" "Yes, Zek." "Good. You learn faster than you look." Heavy footsteps shook the landing pad. 3 M6 Grant combat mechs stood beyond Zek, each nearly 6 meters tall, broad and boxy, with battered olive drab armor and compact orange-visored cockpits set high into their torsos. Zek's machine carried a massive 30mm GAU-8 rotary rifle in both mechanical hands. The mech beside it had wild tiger stripes painted across the armor, with Vex stenciled over the chest in huge, sloppy letters. It carried an enormous 120mm pump-action tank rifle, part shotgun and part main battle tank cannon. The third machine was cleaner. Kyrie's had been painted across its chest in neat regulation block letters. Its weapon was a thick bullpup assault rifle built around a 20mm Bushmaster autocannon. Vex's voice boomed through his external speakers. "This the new guy you were talking about, Zek? He looks like he still sleeps with a nightlight." Crix answered in a calmer, precise tone. "He is taller than the last one. That is something. Perhaps he will survive longer than 12 minutes. Zek didn't look back. "Both of you shut up. He's mine today. If he dies, I get to say, 'I told you so,' for the next 6 months." Rin walked past with both pistols held low. "Try to return him with the same number of limbs." Zek looked up at her. "Try not to get shot in the ass again, Sato." "That happened once." "It happened twice. The second time barely counts." The ground began to shake. Not from the mechs. From the jungle. Hundreds of ant troopers poured through the tree line in a broken black-green tide. Their grown helmet shells bobbed above their heads as they charged, organic rifles flashing with wild green energy fire. Some bolts sailed over the firebase. Others struck trees, mud, or the ants running ahead of them. Behind the mass infantry came mantises. Tall, lean, and fast, they moved through the mist with folded blade limbs held close to their bodies. The wicked grin spread across the defenders on the wall. 2 Abrams tanks roared to life on reinforced firing ramps. Their 120mm cannons fired almost together, blasts punching through the jungle edge and throwing ant troopers into the air. One mantis leapt onto the nearest Abrams and drove a blade between 2 armor plates. The tank commander climbed halfway out of the turret with a crowbar and started beating it across the head while the gunner kept firing. All along the perimeter, Firebase ZULU came alive. Mark IIs poured rifle fire through the firing slits. Meon troops with cat ears, flattened beneath their helmets, darted between sandbag positions, firing compact submachine guns in short bursts. 2 enormous Lupari braced behind a heavy autocannon and roared together as brass poured around their bare paws. Zek flicked his cigarette away. Try to keep up, Private Federation. If you see anything with too many legs, shoot it. That's the whole briefing? That is literally your only job today. Zek sprinted toward his M6. Jake chambered around in his M4 and followed. The first hive wave crashed into the outer wire. Jake dropped behind a HESCO barrier and fired controlled bursts. 5.56 rounds snapped through chitin. Ants toppled into the mud, only to be trampled by the ranks behind them. The recoil felt raw. The noise felt real. Nothing about it resembled the clean, distant simulations he had known in the Federation. Rin moved farther down the barrier line, firing left, then right, the Berettas flashing and alternating rhythm. She never seemed to stop moving. One ant trooper raised its rifle toward Jake. Rin put 2 rounds through its nearest eye before it could fire. She glanced over. Try looking at the ones shooting at you. I was busy. Busy dying. A mantis vaulted over the HESCO barrier directly in front of Jake. He barely had time to lift the M4. The creature's blade came down. Jake caught it across the rifle. For one impossible instant, the 2 weapons held. Then the biological blade sliced through the M4 as though it were made of wet wood. The upper half spun away into the mud. Jake staggered backward, holding the pistol grip, stock, and half a receiver. He stared at it. Son of a bitch. Zek's M6 stomped into view. The GAU-8 rotary rifle spun with a rising mechanical scream. A short burst tore the mantis apart and painted the barrier behind it green. No time for crying, Private, Zek barked. Grab something and keep shooting. Jake threw the remains of the M4 aside and ran toward the nearest supply bunker, a half-collapsed shipping container with green bolts punching holes through its metal walls. He dove through the doorway. Rin was already inside. She dropped 2 empty magazines, slammed fresh ones into her Berettas, and kicked an AK-12 across the floor toward him. Catch! Jake trapped the rifle beneath his boot, grabbed it, and checked the magazine. A K-12, Rin said. Safety's off. 30 rounds. Point the loud end toward the bugs. I know how a rifle works. Her eyes dropped to the 2 pieces of M4 still hanging from his sling. Evidence says otherwise. Another energy bolt burned through the container wall between them. Rin drew both pistols again. Move, Colonel Puncher. They went back out together. The heavier AK-12 hammered against Jake's shoulder as he laid down fire. tearing through ant troopers more decisively than the M4 had. Steve slid into cover beside him, carrying an M16A3 that definitely had not belonged to him 10 minutes earlier. New gun, boss? Bold choice. Where did you get that? Steve looked down at the rifle. I found it. A soldier behind them shouted, That's my rifle. Steve leaned around the barrier and fired another burst. Finders keepers! Farther up the wall, 2 Mark IIs had both grabbed the same mounted heavy machine gun and were physically pulling it back and forth. It's my turn. No, it's mine. You got the last wave. A mantis came over the parapet and cut one drone's arm off at the shoulder. The damaged Mark II looked at the severed limb, picked it up with his remaining hand, and began beating the mantis with it. I'm still using that. His partner finally won control of the machine gun and opened fire. A new sound tore through the chaos. Turbofans. Captain Kira Solari's voice cracked across the command net. Vulture 1 to Zulu. Napalm inbound, danger close. Anybody standing outside the walls in 10 seconds is volunteering to become barbecue. 2 A-10 Warthogs screamed low across the tree line. Kira's lead aircraft wore battered woodland camouflage, a shark mouth beneath the nose, and painted eyes staring down the jungle. A light gray ghost pilot flew the second Warthog tight behind her. Napalm canisters fell. Fire rolled across the approaching swarm in a long orange wall. Ant troopers vanished inside it. Mantises burned as they ran, their blade limbs thrashing through the smoke. For one beautiful second, it looked as though the attack had broken. Then something enormous moved inside the flames. The bastion stepped out. It was the size of a main battle tank and built lower than one. A massive rounded shell covered its rear body. Black chitin and shining with a blue oily sheen beneath the fire. Its head sat tucked under a thick armored thorax. A long biological horn swept upward from its head like a nodachi blade. Steam hissed from acid vents beneath the forward thorax and neck. Napalm ran burning across its shell. It was very much alive and very angry. The creature raised its head and released a deep, gurgling roar that Jake felt through his ribs. Then it lowered the horn into line with the fire base. Rin stopped firing. Oh, you have got to be kidding me. The bastion charged. It smashed through the outer HESCO barriers as though they were cardboard boxes. Concertina wire tangled around its legs and snapped. Every step drove tremors through the fire base. Jake raised the AK-12. The rifle suddenly felt very small. Zek, I see it, the gray answered. For the first time, the sarcasm had left his voice. All positions, hold on to your assholes. This is about to get biblical. The 3 M6 moved into a firing line. Cricks fired first. The 20mm Bushmaster rifle hammered in precise controlled bursts, shells striking the bastion's forward armor in tight groups. Chitin cracked and splintered around one acid vent. Zek's GAU-8 spun up and joined in. The rotary cannon produced a continuous Terran roar. Streams of 30mm fire chewed across the creature's chest and shoulder plates. Vex worked the enormous pump on his weapon. The mechanism slammed back and forward with a heavy metallic clack. Over here, motherfucker! The 120mm tank rifle fired with a deafening boom. The shot struck the bastion's upper shell and exploded in a storm of black fragments. The creature staggered and then kept coming. Jake emptied the AK-12 into the cracked armor. The bolt locked back. He looked for another magazine. The bastions smashed through the next barrier line. There was no time. Jake threw the rifle aside and sprinted toward a wrecked Mark II lying beside a raised firing step. An M60 machine gun rested in the mud next to it, ammunition belt trailing from an open box. He grabbed the weapon. It was heavier than it looked. He dragged it onto the firing step, planted the bipod, and slapped the belt into place with shaking hands. "Steve, feed me!" Steve abandoned his stolen rifle and dove in beside him. "Feeding you, boss." He caught the ammunition belt in both metal hands and lifted it clear. Jake pulled the stock against his shoulder and squeezed the trigger. The M60 roared. Recoil drove through his entire body. He leaned forward, teeth bared, and kept firing. Bullets hammered the bastion's damaged chest plates. Spent brass poured around his boots. His shoulders began burning almost immediately. "Lean into it, kid," Zek shouted over the weapon's fire. "Hug the bastard." Rin appeared behind the firing step and shot an ant trooper trying to climb over the barrier. Then another. She looked at the approaching bastion and back at Jake. "You picked a machine gun?" "It was available." "So was running." A mantis came over the shattered wall behind them, folded blades snapping forward. Rin dropped into the mud on one knee. Both Berettas flashed. 2 rounds struck the joint beneath one blade. 2 more hit the throat. The mantis twisted in the air and crashed beside Jake. "Keep shooting the big one," Rin shouted. "I've got the ugly little bastards." "They're all ugly." "Then shoot the biggest." Jake held the trigger. The M60 bucked and roared. Crix shifted his aim, placing another disciplined burst into the bastion's forward seam. One acid vent ruptured. A pressurized stream of green fluid sprayed across the wall. Rin grabbed the back of Jake's vest and hauled him sideways, just as the acid struck the firing step. Concrete hissed and blackened. The sole of one of Rin's boots began smoking. She looked down. "You bug-faced piece of shit. I like these boots." She emptied both pistols into the exposed vent. The bastion swung its head. Its Nodachi horn carved through a concrete fighting position, shearing away the corner and throwing 2 Mark IIs into the air. The creature was inside the firebase now. Up on the wall, the one-armed drone had started using his severed limb as a club. "I'm doing my part." Another Mark II had finally repaired the speaker system. Thunderstruck, kicked back in at full speed, pounding across the battlefield. His partner shouted, "Stop singing and reload." "I'm multitasking." The bastion drove forward through the combined fire. Its armor was cracking. Its legs were bleeding. It still refused to fall. Zek's voice cut through the net. "Zulu Actual, this is Grant Lead. Broken Arrow. Bastion inside the perimeter. We need everything," Kira answered immediately. "Broken Arrow copied. 4 warthogs rolling in. Get your heads down and mark the ugly one." Rin looked at the tank-sized beetle towering over the shattered defenses. "Think they'll find it." The sky filled with turbofans. Kira came in first, practically skimming the firebase wall. 3 ghost pilot warthogs followed in a tight, staggered line behind her. All 4 GAU-8 cannons opened fire with one long, ripping roar. The air itself seemed to tear apart. Thousands of depleted uranium rounds hammered the bastion and the swarm behind it. Trees exploded into splinters. Mud erupted in long straight lines. ant troopers vanished into green mist. The Bastion reared as the first burst ripped across its side. A second warthog struck the rear shell. The third walked fire along its exposed underside. Kira's aircraft dipped lower than seemed possible and stitched another burst straight down its back. Her laughter came through the radio. 3 tails coming in hot. The final ghost pilot followed her through, cannon fire punching into the vent Crix had opened. The Bastion's forward armor burst apart. Acid sprayed across the ground beneath it. Its front legs buckled. Jake saw the opening. He locked the M60 into his shoulder and held the trigger down. The barrel began to glow. The weapon shook so violently his vision blurred. Steve kept the belt aligned, cyan eyes narrowed into sharp combat shapes. "Keep going, boss." Jake roared and kept firing until the belt ran empty. The M60 clicked dry. His arms continued shaking. Zek's M6 lunged forward and slammed its armored shoulder into the Bastion's wounded side. The creature rolled half over, exposing the damaged thorax. Crix put one final 20mm burst into the opening. Vex cycled the pump on his tank rifle. The huge mechanism slammed back into battery with a metallic clack. His external speakers boomed across the firebase. "Boomstick!" He fired from point-blank range with a thunderous blast. The 120mm round punched through the exposed thorax and detonated inside. The Bastion released one final ear-splitting screech. Then it collapsed sideways. Its shell smashed through part of the outer wall and settled into the mud with a deep, final impact. The sudden silence felt louder than the battle. Jake let go of the M60. The smoking weapon slipped from his numb hands and fell into the mud. His shoulders were on fire. His ears rang. His whole body was coated in sweat, dirt, and bug fluid. Steve stepped out from behind him, approached the dead Bastion, and poked its horn with one finger. Nothing moved. He gave Jake a cheerful thumbs up. "I think we won that one, boss." Zek's cockpit hatch opened. The little gray leaned out, lit a fresh cigarette, and looked down at Jake with complete disappointment. "Congratulations, Private. You just turned a perfectly good M60 into a very expensive club." Jake tried to straighten. "What?" "The barrel's fucked. You held the trigger like it owed you money." Jake attempted to laugh. It came out as a wheeze. Around Firebase ZULU, the last ant troopers were being cut down or chased back into the jungle. Surviving mantises disappeared into the trees. Mark IIs began dragging wounded soldiers away from the walls, while others immediately argued over who had killed more bugs. The speakers crackled. Thunderstruck continued at the correct speed, loud and triumphant. Kira's voice came over the general channel. "Vulture 1 to ZULU. You're welcome. Try not to let anything else the size of a tank inside before dinner." Rin walked toward Jake, holstered one pistol, and pulled the magazine from the other. She stopped in front of him. Without warning, she squeezed his upper arm. Pain shot through his shoulder. Jake winced. Ow. Still attached. She released him and looked down at the ruined M60. Then she looked toward the broken pieces of his M4. Then toward the mud where he had thrown the AK-12. Her eyes returned to him. "You always murder every weapon they give you?" "Apparently." Rin took a cigarette packet from her vest, shook one loose, and pressed it into his hand. Jake stared at it. "I don't smoke." "You're on mud. Give it an hour." She walked away before he could answer. Zek climbed down from his mech and landed lightly in the mud. Vex and Crix opened their cockpits behind him, the two other Z'Atari already arguing over which shot had actually killed the Bastion. Zek stopped beside Jake and took another drag from his cigarette. First day, you lose a rifle. Second day, you lose another rifle and nearly kill yourself with a machine gun you can barely lift. Jake looked at the cigarette Rin had given him. Technically, the first rifle was cut in half. Still lost it. The AK is probably recoverable. Then go find it before somebody else adopts it. Steve raised the stolen M16A3. Finders keepers. The soldier who owned it was still shouting from the wall. Zek looked back at Jake. Keep this up, and we might actually make a soldier out of you. Jake looked around Firebase ZULU. The walls were burning. The outer defenses had been torn open. A dead Bastion lay half inside the perimeter. Tanks and mechs stood among smoking shell casings. Soldiers cursed, laughed, carried wounded friends, and immediately began rebuilding what the hive had broken. Nobody looked polished. Nobody looked normal. Nobody had run. Jake put the unlit cigarette between his lips. Somewhere above the firebase, the ISAF flag was still flying. For the first time since he had been thrown into a drop pod and fired toward the surface of mud, Jake Harper felt something other than punishment. He felt useful. He felt wanted. He looked at Zek, Rin, Steve, and the three battered M6 standing in the wreckage. A tired smile pulled at the corner of his mouth. Maybe he could belong here after all.
Hear the roar of the guns. sundown.